In the heart of Burkina Faso, nestled between hills and forest land, lies a modest little town called Koudougou. Every morning, the sun rises like a golden prayer over its rooftops, spilling light through the tall trees, painting the ground with patches of hope, and among that light walked a man, Ibrahim Traoré, the fearless young president. The people loved him. To them, he wasn't just a leader. He was their lion, fierce, proud, but with a heart that beat only for his nation. But this morning, something was different. Traoré's motorcade was headed toward a rural tribal region. He was scheduled to inaugurate a new school and health centre, an act of service that had become his trademark. His security detail was tight, the convoy bulletproofed, and yet there was a strange tension in the air, a kind of silence that doesn't belong in the daylight. As the convoy moved deeper into the forest, the stillness was broken. Suddenly, an elephant appeared in the middle of the dirt road, massive, towering, its tusks stained with the dust of the land. It didn't look wild, it looked aware. "Sir, we should reroute," one of the security officers said, hand tightening around his rifle. Traoré held up his palm, stopping him. "No, he's not angry. He's warning us." The men looked at the president like he was crazy. But Traoré's eyes didn't waver. The elephant didn't flinch. It stamped its foot heavily into the earth. Boom! A split second later, behind them, an explosion. A landmine went off just behind the last vehicle. Dust flew. The jungle screamed. The convoy froze. Silence turned into chaos. Mr. President, into "The car! It's a trap!" yelled the chief of security. But Traoré stood still, eyes locked on the elephant. This wasn't just any creature. This was a guardian, a silent savior who had just risked itself to stop a massacre. The men lowered their weapons. The president walked a step forward, heart pounding, and the elephant let out a mighty roar. Pow! A sound not of rage, but of command, of urgency, of truth. And in that moment, everyone knew. This was no ordinary animal. This was a sign, a protector, a spirit of the land that had just saved their president's life. The forest fell eerily silent once more. The explosion had ripped the air apart, but in its wake came something heavier, a sacred stillness, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the edge of his convoy, eyes locked with the elephant who had saved his life. Dust still floated around them like spirits whispering secrets. The elephant turned, slow, deliberate, and began walking off the road into the thick forest. "What's it doing?" asked a soldier. Traoré's voice was quiet but firm. "He wants us to follow. Mr. President, we can't go in there. We don't know what's waiting. That's exactly why we must." The others hesitated, but Traoré, driven by something deeper than fear, faith, stepped forward, and the elephant led the way. Branches cracked underfoot, birds scattered. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and something else, danger. Yet the elephant moved with certainty, as if it knew every inch of the forest, every hidden threat buried beneath leaves and time. Soon they reached a clearing, and there, just beyond it, a group of men dressed in black, crouched low behind foliage. Guns, radios, a sniper rifle aimed at the road they had just left behind. Traoré and his guards froze. One wrong move, and it would be a bloodbath. But before anyone could speak, the elephant let out a mighty cry. Roar so loud it echoed across the valley. The armed men turned, startled, and that's when Traoré's guards moved in. A swift operation, shots fired, shouts, but the attackers were overwhelmed. Within minutes, the danger had been neutralized. The enemy had been waiting to ambush the president after the explosion, planning to strike when confusion reigned. But the elephant had known. It had not only saved the president once, but twice. Traoré stood in the middle of the chaos, untouched, unharmed. And the elephant, it watched quietly from the tree line, calm, unmoved by the violence. A soldier whispered, "Sir, this creature, It's not just an animal. It's like it was sent by the ancestors. Traoré didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked toward the elephant again, his steps slow, deliberate. He stopped just in front of it, looked into its eyes, and in those deep, dark orbs, he saw something ancient, something unbreakable, the spirit of a land that refused to surrender. He raised his hand. The elephant raised its trunk, and in that silent gesture between man and beast, a bond was forged, not of ownership, not of control, but of mutual respect, of destiny. The elephant turned one last time, then disappeared into the jungle, its body swallowed by shadows and trees. Traoré stood there, surrounded by his people, his guards, and the echo of what had just happened. No words were spoken, none were needed, because in that moment, everyone knew. This nation, this president, this movement was being watched over, not just by guards, but by the very soul of the forest itself. Back in the capital, the atmosphere was electric. News had spread. President Ibrahim Traoré survived an assassination attempt, not by luck, not by intelligence, by an elephant. The people whispered it in the markets. The elders spoke of it in reverence. Children painted the elephant's face on the walls of their schools. It had become more than an animal. It had become a symbol. But for Traoré, the story wasn't over, because something didn't sit right. The ambush was too precise. The explosives on the road, the snipers hiding nearby. The timing, perfect, too perfect. Only a handful of men had known the exact travel route that day, and Traoré had been leading men long enough to know, if an enemy is waiting for you in the dark, someone lit the path. So, he called a meeting. No press, no ceremony, just 5 men, his most trusted. He looked, each one in the eyes, and then he asked one question. Who told them? Silence, a heavy silence that pressed into the walls. None of us, sir, said one of his commanders. We'd never. But Traoré was staring at the floor. His mind wasn't in the room. It was back in the forest, with the elephant. He remembered, the moment clearly, after the second ambush had been stopped, the dust still in the air, the gunfire fading. The elephant had looked past him, into the trees, not in fear, not in confusion, but with recognition, like it had sensed someone familiar hiding in the forest's shadows. And now, that memory returned with full force. Bring me the security logs, Traoré ordered. I want to know who accessed the travel plans. Within hours, it was in front of him, only 4 names. 3 of them were in the room. The 4th, Captain Mori Diallo, a quiet, obedient officer. Loyal, on paper, silent in meetings. But that silence, Traoré now realized, wasn't humility. It was calculation. They found Diallo trying to leave the city, with cash, with forged documents, with a satellite phone connected to foreign intelligence. The betrayal, cut deep. Traoré sat alone that night in his private quarters, the city lights flickering far below his balcony. He didn't speak. He didn't move. His people had tried to kill him, not mercenaries, not foreign enemies, his own. And yet, as he stared into the horizon, he found clarity, because despite the treachery, despite the deception, he was still alive. Not because he was lucky, but because something ancient had intervened, something that couldn't be bought, couldn't be threatened. The elephant. Traoré lit a single candle and placed it by the map of Burkina Faso on his desk. The flickering flame cast the outline of the nation in gold, and he whispered softly, "As long as I breathe, no traitor will rule this land." From that day forward, the elephant wasn't just a symbol of protection. It became a silent judge, watching every move, every meeting, every man, and Traoré ruled with new wisdom, not of fear, but of intuition. Because now he understood, Some truths are spoken by men, but others are revealed by the forest, and the forest had chosen him. Weeks passed. The betrayal had been crushed. The conspirators exposed. Captain Diallo faced military trial and never returned. But something inside President Ibrahim Traoré remained restless. Not fear, not anger, a calling. Every night, he would dream of the forest, not the capital, not war, not power, just trees swaying in silence, and the elephant, always the elephant, watching him, waiting. Finally, he could ignore it no longer. Traoré ordered his convoy to stop at the edge of the jungle. No guards, no drones, no generals, just him and the forest. He stepped into the dense green, the air thick with life. Birds screamed overhead. Leaves rustled with unseen creatures. But he didn't flinch. He walked deeper, past the place where the ambush happened, past the broken tree still scorched from the explosion, past the blood-stained earth, until the jungle grew silent, too silent. Then, a low rumble. Not thunder, not wind. A breath. From the shadows the beast emerged, taller than memory, older than time. Its eyes glowed like twin suns through the canopy. Its massive form moved without a sound, like a ghost. Traoré didn't speak. He simply stood there, and the elephant approached. They stood face to face. No barrier between man and beast. No rifles, no crowns, no politics. Just truth. Traoré, slowly, extended his hand. The elephant lowered its head, and for a brief, infinite moment, skin touched skin. Warm, rough, alive. In that single touch, a story was passed, a memory of centuries, of kings and rebels, of spirits and storms, of balance. Traoré saw visions, fleeting, flashing in his mind. His ancestors, standing in the same forest, seeking guidance. A younger version of himself, barefoot in the dust, dreaming of freedom. Glimpse of the future, his people rising, not with guns, but with dignity. The elephant pulled back, looked at him, then slowly turned and walked away. Not in retreat, but in completion. The forest closed behind it. Traoré stood there, frozen. And then he wept, not in weakness, but in understanding, because now he knew he had not been chosen to be protected. He had been tested to be worthy. When he returned to the capital, his cabinet could see it. Something was different. He spoke slower, sharper, with purpose, like every word had been carved in stone before being spoken. His first order? A new sanctuary to be built at the edge of the jungle, not for tourists, not for soldiers, but for memory, for the elephant. He passed a law declaring the region a sacred, ecological zone, protected by the state, untouchable by profit or politics, and he gave it a name in the local tongue. Nyaro, the Watcher. From that day forward, every soldier who graduated from the academy would visit the forest, to stand where he stood, to learn not from lectures, but from silence. And every year, on the same day of the ambush, Traoré returned, alone, to light a fire at the forest's edge and whisper, "I remember, no one ever saw the elephant again." But it didn't matter, because it was never about the elephant alone. It was about the spirit behind it, the spirit that had watched over the land long before maps were drawn, the spirit that had chosen him, not just to survive, but to lead. And in every child's drawing, in every old woman's prayer, in every soldier's oath, the story lived on. The tale of the man who faced betrayal and was saved by something the world had forgotten. The guardian of the forest, the elephant.